The letter arrived on a gray morning that seemed to carry the weight of unfinished memories. Rachel Whitmore stared at the thin envelope trembling in her hands, her heart pounding like a warning she had ignored for too long. It had taken her 5 years to gather the courage to hire someone to find the man whose heart she had shattered. 5 years of sleepless nights, silent dinners, and a house that felt colder with every passing winter. And now, finally, the detective she hired had sent his report. What he had written inside would change everything she believed about forgiveness, regret, and the man she once called her husband. Before we continue this emotional story, take a moment to support the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love, please like this video. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that forgiveness still exists. Comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. Rachel never thought she would become the kind of woman who searched for a man she once begged to leave. Yet life has a strange way of teaching its most painful lessons long after the damage is done. Years earlier, Rachel and her husband Jonathan Pierce had been the kind of couple people admired. They lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Denver, Colorado. Their house had a white porch, a small maple tree in the yard, and the laughter of two people who believed their future was secure. Jonathan was not a wealthy man, but he was steady and kind. He worked long hours repairing old cars at a local garage, coming home each evening with grease-stained hands and the same warm smile that made Rachel fall in love with him years before. He never forgot their anniversary, never complained when Rachel wanted to redecorate the living room for the third time in a year, and never went to sleep without telling her he loved her. But sometimes the quietest lives hide the deepest storms. Rachel had always dreamed of something bigger. She wanted excitement, recognition, a life that felt extraordinary instead of ordinary. And when a charming real estate investor named Marcus Bennett entered her life, promising adventure and opportunity, Rachel convinced herself she deserved more than the simple life Jonathan offered. The mistake that followed was not sudden. It grew slowly, like a crack in glass that spread silently until the entire surface shatters. By the time Jonathan discovered the truth, the betrayal had already done its damage. Rachel would never forget the way he looked that night, standing in their kitchen, holding the evidence of her affair and shaking hands. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. The pain in his eyes was far worse than anger. Within a week, Jonathan packed his belongings into his old pickup truck and left. He didn't argue during the divorce. He didn't ask for money or explanations. He simply disappeared from Rachel's life with a quiet dignity that made her guilt heavier with every passing day. At first, Rachel believed she had made the right choice. Marcus promised luxury and excitement, and for a while, the illusion felt real. But illusions have a way of fading when reality demands honesty. Marcus left after 8 months, moving to another state when a business deal collapsed. The adventure Rachel chased turned into silence, and that silence lasted for 5 years. During those years, Rachel often drove past the old garage where Jonathan once worked, hoping to see his familiar truck parked outside. But eventually even the owner told her Jonathan had moved away without leaving a forwarding address. Time passed, but regret did not fade. It grew louder. That was why, one restless night, Rachel searched online for a private investigator and found a man named Andrew Coleman. She hired him with a simple request: find Jonathan Pierce. Andrew spent months searching through records, small towns, and quiet communities across the country. Rachel tried not to imagine what Jonathan's life might look like now. Maybe he had remarried. Maybe he hated her. Maybe he had forgotten her completely. The uncertainty was unbearable, and now the envelope was finally in her hands. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, the same table Jonathan had built himself from reclaimed oak, and slowly opened the report. The detective's words were brief but heavy. He had found Jonathan. Rachel's breath caught as she read further. Jonathan had moved to a small coastal town in Oregon. According to Andrew's notes, he worked at a modest boat repair shop and lived in a small rented cottage near the water. But the next sentence made Rachel's chest tighten. Jonathan was not alone. Rachel felt the familiar sting of jealousy mixed with shame. Of course he had moved on. She had broken his heart. He deserved happiness with someone else. Her hands trembled as she continued reading. The detective explained that Jonathan spent most of his time caring for a young boy named Noah. Rachel paused. The report clarified that Noah was Jonathan's adopted son. 3 years earlier, Jonathan had adopted the child after volunteering at a community shelter. Noah had been abandoned as a toddler and suffered from a heart condition that required constant care. Rachel stared at the words for a long time. The man she betrayed had chosen to rebuild his life by giving love to a child who needed it most. Tears blurred her vision, but the final paragraph was what shattered her soul completely. Andrew Coleman had attempted to speak with Jonathan during his investigation. When he mentioned Rachel's name, Jonathan did not react with anger or bitterness. Instead, he simply smiled. He told the detective that he had forgiven Rachel years ago, not because she asked for forgiveness, but because holding on to pain would have made him someone he never wanted to become. Rachel pressed the paper against her chest as sobs broke free. All these years she believed Jonathan must hate her. She had imagined him living with resentment and heartbreak. But instead, he had chosen compassion. He had built a life filled with kindness while she spent years drowning in regret. At that moment, Rachel understood something that no amount of time had taught her before. Forgiveness was not something Jonathan gave her. It was something he gave himself. And somehow, that realization hurt even more than anger would have. Before we reach the end of this story, we have a special request for you. Please write in the comments, "Kind hearts still exist." Your words might inspire someone who is struggling with regret or pain. Rachel never contacted Jonathan after reading the report, not because she didn't want to see him, but because she finally understood that love sometimes means letting someone live the peaceful life they built after surviving your mistakes. Instead, she sold the house they once shared and donated part of the money to the children's shelter Jonathan had volunteered at years earlier. It wasn't redemption. Nothing could erase the past, but it was a beginning, and somewhere on the quiet coast of Oregon, a man named Jonathan Pierce continued repairing boats while raising a boy who needed a father. He never knew that the woman who once broke his heart had finally learned the lesson his silence taught long ago. Sometimes forgiveness is the loudest act of love a person can give. And sometimes the greatest tragedy in life is realizing too late that the person you betrayed was the one who loved you the most. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories that remind us all why compassion still matters in this world.